Okay. Hi, and here we are.
Hello.
Our first podcast.
How exciting.
I know. Ruth and I decided quite a while ago, we started on a art course together, a business course actually, as it happens. But we started in the same week.
Yeah.
So we kept in touch, which is fabulous. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
So my name's Ruth Egon. I'm an artist. I'm predominantly a painter. I started in art, well, really as young as I can remember. When I saw paintings for the first time, it just triggered something in me emotionally that felt like it took me somewhere else in a really nice way. And it felt kind of magical looking at paintings as a child. So that first sparked my kind of creativity. And then as a kid, it was always creative stuff. My Christmas lists were always hobbies and visual arts, and I got a great deal of joy from it from a really young age. And then I went to college. I did fine art at college. I did a foundation year, which is when you get to try all sorts of different visual art. We did everything from photography to glass making to ceramics. That was fantastic. Really enjoyed that. And then I went to university, and by the time it got to my university choice, I did put my sensible hat on and thought that I want to do something that's going to get me a career in visual art. So at that point I decided to do textile design. So I did a university course down in Winchester. I did printmaking. And really, in my heart of hearts, when I think back, I wish I'd have gone and done painting and just followed what I love to do. Yeah. But I kind of let, I suppose, the opinions of other people kind of get in the way. We're taught that things like, you can never make money from art and those sorts of things. And I think those things were in the background of my thinking when I chose textile design. But anyway, I had a fabulous few years down in Winchester School of Art. And then after that, I went into just a normal job, retail type job. Unfortunately, I found that when I graduated in textile design, to get into the industry, we're expected to do unpaid work experience, which I'm not from a family background where I could afford that. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. So unfortunately, it was put on the back burner for a few years. I did make some attempts to still get into the industry, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't working. And then I got a bit fed up, really. I got a bit despondent with it all. I got quite disappointed with it. And then a few years later, when I was about 30, I decided just to go back and do what I loved again, which was painting. And then, to my surprise, it picked up. I had commission requests. I was in galleries. And it just showed me, really, that if you follow your joy and follow what you really love to do, you'll find a way eventually. And I suppose that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast with you, Debbie, was to encourage other people to really follow their passion, be more creative. And there's certain things about creating art that I wish I'd known years ago, because it might have got me into a place where I was doing what I really just love to do. So that was also a reason for starting the podcast.
When you're talking, you mentioned creativity a lot. And I think that a lot of people that come to art later in life, which is more like myself, mine is a completely different story. So it's just, so my story is I did sciences at school. So I did,
totally
physics, chemistry, biology. I thought I was the academic one. Well, to be fair, I was the academic one. I wasn't really, And ironically, because I know that you've worked in IT as well.
Yes.
I worked in IT. But I was always creative.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't do art, I did poetry. So in my 20s, I used to write poetry, and I used to free write, and I used to do things like that. The place that I feel that we connect is that you went through experiences where things were difficult sometimes when you were a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I went through an illness when I was in my 30s, and that was difficult for me. Yeah. So ironically, I've sort of come through art because I think you get to the point where you do what you love, it makes you feel good. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
Somebody was in the group yesterday and they said, "Hi, I'm Sue. I'm feeling life's too short not to have a go. I'm feeling a little bit anxious about this."
Yeah.
But actually, it's it's paint, isn't it, and paper, or it's, you know what I mean? It's not anything to feel anxious about. And so I think I wanted to do the podcast as well, because you do want to reach out to more people, and I do teach art as well, but I don't teach art in schools. I teach art as sort of, in a way you could say, hobby artists, but some of the artists that have come through me have gone on to do other things as well. It's interesting because I came into art, I fell into it really, because I was so poorly that I'm like, what do? I need to do something. And I started off doing bits of craft, and then I went on to art. And I think in these podcasts we'll talk about all these different things, like what's the difference between craft and art, why you feel a bit anxious about the canvases and all that sort of thing. The reason I want to do it is the same reason, I think. It is to reach out to people. The reason that's why I'm doing the podcast. I know you're wanting to do a membership, and I am definitely wanting to teach, whether that's in membership or courses, I'm not quite sure. Online, I already teach, so it just seems like another step in the right direction, really. I do want to answer things, and I want people to see art as a creative pursuit, I think, as opposed to a talent, which is what a lot of people see it as. So they come and they're like, I can't paint.
It's funny, isn't it? Some of the ideas that we
I'm
have.
not saying there's not people that are talented. I'm not. There are people that I'm sure have got genetics that predispose them to certain things, but I think we're all creative. And I think if you want to do it, then that's what I'd like to get across. Definitely.
I think it's, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think people think to start off being creative, they've got to be good right from the get-go. And we almost forget all of the benefits that you get from being creative, everything from, mental health to just having something enjoyable to do as a person. It's lovely to have something else, isn't it, in your life?
It is.
Whether you want to be a full-time artist or not, I think it can benefit everybody.
We decided to call it Art Alchemy after a lot of
thought.
It was quite a lot of thought, wasn't it, as to what we're going to call it. But it was to do with the fact that art can be very transforming for people.
Yes.
People will come to you and say, I want to paint, but I can't paint. And then they start painting, and then they're surprised, and then they get some feedback. And there's loads of things that, we can touch on now, but we'll go into in more detail later. But you get that, it's like, it's a little bit of magic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
That flair bit of magic in there.
Yeah. And you never really know what's going to happen until you start the painting. I don't know whether your process is the same, Debbie, but I can have a few ideas about what I'm going to do, but whatever turns up on the canvas is always a bit of a surprise. And it's nice to have something that's kind of unpredictable and a little bit magical, isn't it?
I think the best paintings are the ones that I always say they paint themselves.
Yeah.
They're the best ones. Yeah. So sometimes you plan a painting and it goes the way you want. And in a way, that's just creating things that you've already know.
Things
sometimes
you've already
the paint
seen.
takes you in a different direction.
And
that's when it gets really, really, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think whether I've properly introduced myself. So, in 2000, I was poorly. I wasn't very well at all, but I wanted to do something because I had been an IT administrator and everything, and I wasn't working at the time because I was so poorly.
Yeah.
And what I decided was that I wanted to go to a craft group, and our local MS society said, you could set one up. And I'm like, set one up? And there was these Millennium Awards at the time.
Yeah.
And so I set up this craft group. And I'm going to try and cut a long story short. So following doing that for a while, which basically I thought was just we were all going to meet and do different things. But people joined the craft group who'd never done craft before. So then I had to like learn how to do craft to show them how to do craft. I got a teacher for a while, but then we couldn't afford it. And we used to like fund our own little craft group with just making cards and stuff like that. And that was great because I didn't want to burden the MS Society with the money of it. So that's how we did it. Anyway, after a while, I was like, oh, what do I do now? You know, and then I decided I'd go back to university. I couldn't go to university bricks and mortar, but I did an OU degree, and I was interested in music. I did a degree not in art at all. It was music and creative writing. And the creative writing taught me creativity. They literally in university for creative writing teach creativity because they separate it out into the editing and the creative side. So they get you to write without thinking, don't put any full stops in, etc., etc. And then you do the editing. So I think that's helped me a lot. But what happened is at the end of the degree, I came out of there, went back to like my watercolour classes that I'd done before, and because I'd been doing those sorts of things, just the sorts of things that people go to in the village halls, etc. And I was like, crikey, I can paint better. Honestly, that's the truth. I actually can paint better. I couldn't paint before. I can paint now.
Amazing.
And that was about the observation and the creativity. I'd worked on one side of it without realising it.
Do you think there was something that kind of triggered you mentally to stop holding yourself back, to let yourself go a bit more, and that led into the painting?
I went back to painting because I got more time again. That's why I went back to the painting. There was a bit of a block because I was a bit worried about materials. It sounds really stupid now because I try every material under the sun. But at the time, I sort of had only done watercolour and there was a little bit of a... But I think the fact that I felt that I could create better meant that I then started to feel more able to experiment, etc. It's strange, isn't it? It really is strange. There's a lot to unpack there. There is a lot to explore. But it's why I started. That is probably why I started teaching, because I believed that you can teach creativity. And I don't think that I teach art. I think I teach creativity, really. And obviously, then you produce art. But that's how I sort of think of it in my head. I don't even think of myself as a great artist, and I certainly wasn't in 2016. I think over time I'm getting better as an artist because I'm doing more art. And you know, and to be honest, I think that is the trick of getting better. Doing more art,
it just
paying
takes
attention.
time, doesn't it?
It does take time.
Experimentation, and there's also working out, you know, what's your medium, what are you trying to say, all of these big questions. I think part of me, in a way, was held back by doing art because there's so many questions. What material do I use? What do I want to say? And then you start thinking about, like you were saying, what equipment do I need? It can all be quite overwhelming, can't it, if you've not got a place to start with this stuff?
And when you look back at it in hindsight, sometimes it looks quite simple. It really is.
Your brain can definitely overcomplicate things, and I think there's a part of creativity where you've just got to be brave and go for it rather than overthinking it and just get going.
That is what you're saying is exactly the problem, because your left brain kicks in, you know, the logical side, and creativity doesn't work like that, because you'll collect all your information. When I find it really easy when I look at poetry, because what I used to do was I used to think, oh, I've got an idea for poetry, and I'd start like thinking about it, and then I would let it like percolate in my brain. That's the incubation period. There is actually a creative process that I think it was Graham Wallace. I wrote a blog about it.
Yeah.
So Graham Wallace, in 1926, I think he was a psychologist, said there's actually a creative process, and he'd split it into 4 areas.
Yeah.
So, you know, and one of them is this incubation period where you let it all sort of sink in instead of forcing it.
Yeah.
And then you get these ideas going. And for me, I might have an idea of a poem, and it would take me about a week to like sort of mull it over.
Yeah.
And then I'd get up in the morning, and that was my aha moment, and I'd just go
get it on the page,
and it would be, and write it.
Yeah.
And that's that. I need another phase. I need to edit it, but that's sort of how the creativity works. With the art process, is that sort of it's a bit more difficult because I'm working on my art process now. Because I used to have a process for painting a painting, and I still do if I'm in class. And that's simple. That's like preparing as much as you get ideas together, get your composition and colours together, decide what you're doing. And then I'd used to do little thumbnails in a sketchbook or some colour notes or whatever. And I do that in class, even as if I'm going round, I'll go round and say, you know, think about your colours, think about. Then it's the actual doing bit, and then it's the editing bit. It's the same process, but sometimes we get stuck in these processes, and then you have to go back. To it might be that the idea is not quite right, or you're trying to edit before you've done the creation phase, or whatever. So it's really interesting.
It is, and for me it's a continuous cycle as well, so I'm always collecting bits in my sketchbook that I find interesting. And that could be from absolutely anywhere. It could be a photo from my local park, because I do quite a lot of botanical, nature inspired art.
You do,
Or it could be something from a piece of packaging that I like the colour combination of. So definitely think that incubation phase, I think, is probably always going on in my brain. Don't know about you, Debbie, but even if I'm out and about, I might spot something and think, oh, you know, it might spark a new idea. And
if
then
I'm driving along in a car, and I go along because we live in the countryside, so it's the Staffordshire countryside. That's something we haven't said.
Where are we from?
Where we're from. We're not actually next door. Ruth. You could say where you are, and then I'll tell me a little story, and then you can continue. So we're driving along, and I'm literally paying attention to how the lights hit in the trees, or you know, the seasons or whatever, because we also both are nature inspired artists as well. So So where are you from, Ruth?
So I was born in a place called Walsall, which is in the West Midlands. It's just north of Birmingham. I then went to university in Winchester. I met my partner, and we moved to Scotland together. So at the moment I'm living in Dunfermline in Fife in Scotland. I've been there for probably about 12 years now. I've been up in Scotland. How about you, Debbie?
Did you go to Scotland for... Sorry, I'm just thinking.
No, go on.
Did you go because of work? Or connections to family? Or?
I met my partner in Winchester, and we decided to go up and give things a go. He's in the army, so it was kind of... had to go up and give it a try, and we're still together, thankfully. But I do love Scotland. I love, you know, the nature, the landscape. People are very friendly up here as well. We're
in sort of farming country, really, I suppose. It's lovely, but you haven't got the ruggedness that I can imagine you've got there.
You get quite dramatic landscape in Scotland. Those of you that don't know geographically, Dunfermline is just 5 of Edinburgh, but it's by the Forth coast, so it's beautiful because you know you're close enough that you can get into Edinburgh. That's a really vibrant, interesting city, but then you're far away enough that you've got your own kind of... it feels quite rural where we are as well, so it's lovely. It's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it sounds fabulous, to be honest. Yeah.
It's nice.
Sometimes I'd quite like to be a little more rugged, but we're quite close to Shropshire, the Shropshire Hills, and we're close to Derbyshire. So there's quite a lot around here, and it's not that far when we go. It's only 2 hours to Lancashire. You know, Yorkshire Dales. You know, we can get to places.
Get out there. Yeah.
So I suppose that's the advantage of being quite central, really.
Yeah.
But sounds like I'll have to come up and visit you.
Definitely.
Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Do some painting.
Do some arty stuff together.
Yeah, because that's the other thing that I do like to do, and I don't know about your process. In the collecting phase, I like to go outside.
Yes, yeah, I do. I mean, to be honest, most days I try and get out for a walk, and quite often I'll take a lot of pictures whilst I'm out. I don't tend to sort of paint when I'm out and about. I'll bring the pictures back and use them as inspiration rather than doing it kind of in the field. Probably a big reason for that is the weather's not always great in Scotland,
Yeah,
so
that
you
probably
can't
is,
always take your sketchbook and your paints
to
and
be
stuff.
Fair, I do go outside and I
Yeah.
do paint, and I also sketch, and sometimes I'll paint on big sheets that I'll
Yeah.
come and collage when I get back, and there's all
Yeah.
sorts of things that I do outside.
Yeah,
But I tend not to do it in the middle of winter. So
yeah, yeah.
I am a bit of a I know there's others that do that
Yeah.
go off, and
Yeah.
but I'm not that. I'm not. It's not that I'm not keen. I do
Yeah.
take photographs, but I'm not going to get cold.
No.
Even my studio's got underfloor heating. I like being comfortable. Yeah, my granddaughter said the other day, she says, "Oh, you've got a settee in here now." Yes, I've actually managed to fit a settee in. Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose we ought to talk a little bit about what we paint and why we paint in this episode. So I paint nature-inspired paintings. You can see one behind me that's in progress at the moment. I'm kind of a mix of abstract and real. Some aspects of my painting look quite realistic, but then I mix in abstract elements as well. I use a lot of colour. I like to use colour as a joyful thing, an uplifting thing that I try and do with my art, and connect people a bit more to nature as well. Because I think nowadays in contemporary society we kind of forget that we're still part of nature, we're human beings, and things like flowers and nature, they're actually really kind of meditative. I love going out and walking in nature, so I'm trying to replicate that feeling in my art of being uplifted and being inspired. So that's what I hope to achieve.
I'm just wondering, so in your art, because a lot of that is similar to mine, but there are differences, obviously.
Yeah.
So I, for years, wasn't sure what style I would have, or what subject I would have. So have you always had your inspiration to paint nature as opposed to wanting to paint pet portraits or whatever?
It did take a while to get to, and I think that's quite normal for most artists. I went through various different phases. I've done pet portraits, like you mentioned, Debs, before.
Yeah, a few pet portraits.
Yeah, it's what I started doing actually when I got back to painting. I thought I just want to give something a try, and I love animals, so I did quite a few commissions of pet portraits when I first started painting again. And then I got a little bit bored of it, and then I thought I want to give something else a try, so I started doing some landscapes. And then I started thinking about, I suppose a big part of it was my background in textile design as well. I like visually appealing images, and I like integrating pattern into my work as well to give it a bit of kind of movement and vibrancy. So it did take a while, and it was a case of just giving things a go and seeing what I enjoyed, and just keep developing that and working on those ideas.
I do feel like you have got quite a distinctive. I do look at your work and say, oh yeah, I can see that's Ruth's.
Yeah.
And that does take time, I think.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
I would say I'm almost not there yet, but almost. Like, nearly there. From my perspective, I came topsy-turvy to it in as much as a lot of people paint and then they become teachers.
Yeah.
That's because of what they do.
Yeah.
And the reason I started to teach was more to do with materials, really. So people were saying to me, there was a lot of people who said to me, oh, how do you do that? Why are you doing that? Etc. When I was experimenting.
Yeah.
And I live in a little village, and I said, well, if you want, I don't want... Lots of people were coming round and going, you know, how do you do that? And I was saying, oh, come round and I'll show you. And then I thought, hang on a minute, there's about like 8 people here who were asking me how to do this. I could actually open a class. So I was going to a watercolour class, and I started a mixed media class, actually, which was, if I'm honest, in hindsight, a bit of a mistake, because I used to take all the mixed media. Well, that's another matter. I do like playing with different materials, and so I've been through various iterations of doing that, and possibly that comes from my science background as well. I was just like, I like to know how things fit together, and that's often not where artists come from, really. So I'm a bit of a weird mix, but although I say that, artists have got all sorts of reasons, haven't they?
It's really interesting when you ask people why they started and how they've got to where they are now. So do you think you're still quite process-led? Because that could be one way of describing it, is that...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I never realised I was process-led.
Yeah.
However, I know when it was, when we were doing the course with Amanda... so we did a course with Amanda Heath, which was to do with art business, really.
Yes.
But it meant that I was amongst a lot of artists, and I was seeing a lot of their websites. So I was looking at a lot of their art, because that was part of the course, really. And it made me think, oh, hang on a minute, I really like that art, and I really like that art. And then I remember going to Manchester Art Fair, and I went with Claire, who you would know. And when we went, I was like, oh, I like that artist and that artist and that artist, and they all paint in a similar way. And I know it sounds really, really stupid, but I realised that abstract isn't some sort of woolly term for putting just different things on a bit. It sounds weird. So there is a form of art which is non-objective art, which isn't based on anything, but abstract art is actually based on a subject. And what you're trying to do is find the essence of that subject, your own connection to that subject, and pull out what is of real interest to you, so that you can pass it on to other people, that feeling. And that is what I'm trying to do. That is what, and I got so excited when I realised about this, and felt a bit daft, actually, because it's a bit of one of those hindsight things, same as we talked about earlier. Since then, I mean, this year, it sounds really weird. This is probably why I talk so much about creative process and everything, because I'm starting to think about my own process. So I've learned a lot about other people's processes, and I'm just trying to say, well, is that part of my process, or am I still working from other people? Because when you first start, you obviously have a go at what other people do.
And there's nothing wrong with that, because you have to start off somewhere. And it's quite a good place to start, because at least you're giving yourself a few parameters about what it is that you're going to paint or draw or whatever else, and at least it gets you going with that whole process of making something.
And I have started to have an in-betweeny phase. So I go out, collect, and that could be sketching, painting, or photographs. Come back, or even just thinking about it, to be honest. Come back. And then I try and take those thoughts, or even sometimes the paintings I literally collage or whatever, into sketchbooks and things to get ideas to put onto paintings. But so there's almost an extra phase in there. And I feel like that's part of my incubation phase. So is that sort of how you work?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're similar in that sense. I definitely keep ongoing sketchbooks. I also quite like to journal quite a lot. So as I'm painting, sometimes something will crop up and I think, yes, that's the thing that I'm looking for. This is the thing that I'm trying to articulate in painting, because I suppose the thing the reason why you paint is because you can't really say what you want to say with words. It's something visual, which is its own language. When you think about it, there's all these things around how to visually express things with shape, with colour, with form. So quite often, if something occurs to me whilst I'm painting, a thought about the painting or about the creative process, I'll jot that down because I want to remember it and come back to it and think about it. So I also write as well about the painting process whilst I'm doing it, sometimes jot down ideas and things that crop up.
And I have started to do that more. And I actually did a Louise Fletcher Find Your Joy last year. So she talks a lot about the journaling process.
Yeah.
But I was doing it before that because I met somebody at Manchester Art Fair and I decided to have an art mentor. And basically, it was a bit like having a psychologist for artists. So she said she'd come and she'd talk and she'd listen to you and then reflect back what you said, basically.
Yeah.
And she would say, go back through all of your old work and see where the patterns are.
Yeah.
But now I'm doing it in a conscious way, so I'm doing it more by journaling so that I can see the patterns as they arise. Although obviously that's easier because you've seen patterns in the past.
It's a different way of thinking though, isn't it? You know, to reflect on your work and think about, why did I do that? You know, if I look back at the work that I made when I was at art college, for instance, some of it was very monotone. I did quite a bit of monotone work. It wasn't until later on that I really got into colour as kind of a tool for expression. It didn't come till a bit later. So I suppose these are the kinds of things that you find, but you can only do it through the creative process, through making the art, reflecting on it in your sketchbook, and that constant development, isn't it?
Yeah, it takes time, because how do you know what it is that you like to do or what your process is unless you try different things?
Exactly.
How do you know?
And you're not going to know until you try, and that's the thing about being a creative. It takes that initial kind of brave step, doesn't it, to give it a go. You're not going to be able to sit there for hours and think, well, what kind of style do I want to do, and hit it on the head straight away. You've got to really give it a try and try new things and experiment.
And something else, it never stops.
No, it doesn't. Which can be really nice or really annoying, depending on which way you look at it.
Because I think it's a good thing that it doesn't stop, because otherwise it might get a little bit boring. Once you actually feel, that's it, you're there.
Yeah, I'm done now.
That's it, done. Yeah, you might want to find a new challenge.
Yeah.
But that's the advantage of art, and that is I think that's the biggest advantage of all. It's never going to get boring.
No, you're always going to find something new and different to explore and think about.
You might get stuck. You might need a break.
Yeah.
I don't think it gets boring.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
One of the things I do try and do now with work in collections, rather than a single painting at a start. When I first started, I'd just work on the one painting and put it down, leave it to dry for a bit, come back to it. But I do find if you've got a few canvases on the go at one time, you can switch between them, and I don't get stuck as often as I used to, because I've got something else that I can work on at different stages of the painting process.
Yeah, also, do you use similar colours when you do that? Say, for instance, you're doing a collection, or... Yeah,
I tend to... It's either similar colours or I'm exploring something in a similar vein that the paintings have got, whether that's like a location or there's something that I want to add to my work. It just gives me a bit of freedom to explore that same theme on a couple of different paintings.
And the thing I'd like to explore more, which I've done a little bit in sketchbooks, but is putting my poetry in. That's something that I want. And when I look back at the poetry, in the things that I'm interested in developing in my art, or inspired by in my art, like the nature inspiration and everything, they were all in the poems. So I'm particularly interested in changing of the seasons or changing, those sorts of, it's more than a moment in time. I used to think that I wanted to capture a moment in time because I'd go out and I'd paint a scene and it would be there. And so I was thinking like that. But it isn't that. That's not, it's more than that. I'm trying to capture that feeling of that particular time of year, or even it could be going for a walk, that feeling of that whole experience. And that's why it starts to lean more abstract, because you're trying to pick out all those elements. The sounds and everything. You're trying to pick everything out. I have worked in series, but I need to do more working in series, and I do get a little bit distracted by workshops and things where you're just doing something else. But even that, I'm trying to bring my workshops into my art practice as opposed to as it used to be for the students. So that's interesting.
What keeps you going, Debs, when you feel like, because we all get to points where we can become a bit stuck with our art, or a bit fed up or frustrated we can't really do the thing we want to do on the canvas. What is it about painting that keeps you going, keeps you trying?
I think sometimes I have patches where I don't paint so much, but I'm always doing something towards it. So for me, I mean, over the last year, I haven't lost the underlying interest. So from the point of view of keeping me going, I might do something different. So I'll have phases where I might have a finishing phase, or
or priming
phase
the canvas,
where
or something
you're doing
you can
something
do
that's a
without...
little bit more mundane. Because you're not in that complete creative get it out phase.
But sometimes that can be a bit of a relief though, can't it, to do something quite boring and just say, today I'm not in the mood to do anything particularly groundbreaking, so I'm going to wash my brushes and I'm going to prime a few canvases, and there's always stuff that you can do that's not, hugely creative, but you're still doing
tidying
stuff.
Your studio.
Which
feels awful until you start doing it, and then actually...
and then you're like, oh, I'm glad I did that. And then you might be in the mood to paint afterwards.
And sometimes as well, I'll look at other artists or what they do, that sort of thing. That
can be
there's always something that's related that isn't necessarily the actual physical painting. Because I think if you're painting absolutely all the time...
Oh, I think you'd go bonkers, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm more thinking that your house would be full. You'd have no space left. It's an interesting one. What about you then? What do you think?
Well, I think for me as well, the process of painting and the whole kind of researching phase and thinking about what you like and why you like it, it's actually, I think, led into a better quality of life for myself, because you're actually asking yourself a lot of personal questions about why you're here, really, what lights you up in the world, what is it that you see things are maybe a bit different from other people. I think that part of the process, if you let it, can be a really enjoyable part of the process. So I don't know whether you've ever read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
I haven't read it. I might have bought it.
You need to read it, because it's fantastic. And she talks about being an artist or being a creative. It's not just sitting down at the canvas, but it's about everything that you bring into your life as well. And it's about doing the joyful things that you enjoy, whether that's buying a bunch of flowers to put into your studio, and also things like going out for walks, taking in nature, those sorts of things. But it's more than an art process. It's just about becoming more of yourself and giving yourself permission to like what you like and embrace it, really. So I've gone quite deep there, but
well, no, I think that feels quite, I don't know what the word is, It makes you feel very almost privileged. Does that make sense? It is an amazing thing to find something that is aligned with you, I suppose. I know exactly what you're saying. And I don't think it's just art that happens to people. Sometimes you can see that somebody's doing what they want to be doing.
I think that definitely shines through in artwork. I think you definitely have to have that connection to the thing that you're painting, and then that other people can see that in the artwork that's been made. If you've got that real connection there with what you're doing and why you're doing it. It just takes time, doesn't it, to really dig into that,
and I
dig
think,
quite deep.
You know, those paintings where that's happened, they're what I always call Marmite paintings. Because people either love them or they really don't like them and don't get them at all. And so if sometimes people are like not wanting your work, not liking it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That might be a really good thing. It's something where people, because sometimes people just don't like something because it connects to you, and it's not connecting to them.
It's a personal thing,
And do you get people coming in? I mean, I remember somebody coming in, and she bought this painting actually. So she came in and she said, "Is that the Roundhouse Inn?" And she was referring to something, and that's and it was like, well, it isn't. It's a roundhouse, but it was in a different area. It was my Mitter Manor collection, and she was like, "Oh," she said, you know, and you could tell that she loved the memory.
It meant
she
something
bought the painting. So that's something she connected to. So what I'm trying to say is that it might not be you connect emotionally, they pick up on the emotional and the connection, but it's not necessarily the same connection.
Exact same thing.
It's something personal to them.
I think it goes back to what you were saying before, Debs, about creating that kind of feeling and evoking a feeling in somebody. And I've had experiences as well where the most recent art fair that I did was Glasgow last year. And there were some people that were really drawn to my colour and loved it and said, "Gosh, it's so vibrant, it's fantastic." And then there were other people that came along and were just like, "Wow, I couldn't have this in my house. It's too colourful, it's too bright." And had really strong opinions about it. But I think I'd much rather people had an opinion on it rather than just kind of let it pass them by and didn't do anything for them at all. You know,
absolutely. You want them to have a strong opinion, even if it's bad.
I know. I've got better at that as I've got older. Just kind of let people, you know, whether it's negative, let people have their own opinions, and it's either for them or not.
We were taught how to analyse and give constructive feedback as well. You was quite good actually. And with the writing, we were told the only time you listen to people is when everybody's giving the same thing. Everybody's saying exactly the same thing. And then you might want to start going, oh, maybe I should pay attention to that. But a lot of the time, art is so personal that it's opinion.
Yes, and it's subjective.
It's very subjective. So if you try and please other people all the time, you're going to be splitting yourself. It's not going to work.
You're not going to get any joy from that in the long term, are you?
So that takes a while to learn as well, doesn't it, really?
It does, to have the confidence to really step into yourself and say, this is what I want to do. And that doesn't mean that straight away you have to be selling paintings. It could be for years you just kind of experimenting and seeing what you enjoy. You don't have to put it on show straight away, you know, if you're not comfortable enough to.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think now we'll move on to just rounding everything up, really. Trying to round up things up so that you get some tips and summarise what it is that we've talked about today. Obviously, we've introduced ourselves. There's going to be a lot more that we've forgotten, but you get an idea of who we are. And I think we'll move on to doing a little bit, just what can we take away out of this? So I think over to you, Ruth. What would you say is the biggest takeaway from this, other than getting to know us a little?
So for me, I think the creative journey, you know, whether you're a painter or you do something else creative, it takes time to unravel itself for you to really find your own niche. So I think one of the tips is to be patient with yourself and to keep trying and keep going and give yourself permission to try new things as well. That's something that I wish I'd known earlier on. You don't have to settle to one idea and just stick at it. It's okay to try different things and to find your way as you go.
Yeah, and also I think that my big takeaway as well is it's not just about the literal painting on the canvas. It's not that bit. That's just as important, if not more so, is getting the ideas together, going out for a walk. And I think what you said about it being part of a whole creative, it's almost like this is another one as well as the journey. We've got a lifestyle, haven't we? Creative lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a way of life. Yeah.
All these buzzwords. Yeah. So it's good that if you're doing something else, you can still notice things.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the reason that I was better at painting after I had come out my creative writing degree was because I noticed things, just paying attention, really.
You need a bit of life experience behind you as well to work out what it is that you want to say, what your opinions are on certain things, because quite often when you're younger you've not experienced enough of life to really dig that deep, or you know, it takes time, doesn't it? And it's a process of finding out who you are, what you want to say, which is a huge thing, isn't it?
It is. And I think giving yourself permission as well to paint what you want to paint as opposed to other people want you to paint.
Yeah.
Because surprisingly, I think if you paint what you want to paint and are almost, I'm not saying selfish about it, but really mindful of who you are, then you're actually going to connect with people more, or connect with the right people more, those that are interested in you. And really, if you're constantly doing something that you don't want to do, then you're not going to feel like doing more of it.
No,
whereas what happened to me last year, where I was trying to paint the things I did want to do, it's just really exciting, and so you want to do more of it, you know. You don't get the same,
makes it enjoyable.
So part of this podcast that we wanted to do is also about how art can be quite good for you as well, and almost you're exploring your own likes and dislikes, and your own interests. I think that's something that we connect on, not just the nature and the inspiration and that side of it, and even the colour, although I'm trying to go a little more muted in, you know, or the contrast of mute and colour, that's where I'm at the minute. But I think there's a lot where we do meet, which is why we connected, really, isn't it? Yeah. I certainly looked at your art and connected to it really quickly. So what would be interesting will be if you would like to ask us any questions. You've got an idea of what we want to discuss, but it's very, very broad, the topic. So if there's anything in particular you wanted to discuss, then, you know, let us know. I'm sure there's going to be a comment section. We don't quite know that yet because we haven't uploaded things.
We need to work that out still.
but once
what
we
was
do
that
know,
thing about giving things a go? Before you feel
let
ready.
us know on our socials. We'll put them below or whatever. You know, I'm sure we can do that too.
We'll work something out.
Okay, so it's great to be here, and thanks for spending an hour with us, Ruth. That's great.
Yeah, thanks for listening. It's been good.
Been a lovely chat. Enjoyed it.
It's been fun.
Okay, so bye for now.
See you soon.
Bye.